Hey everyone, how is it going? And welcome back here for another episode with some PLO content. My name is Luke, and I hope you're all doing well in these corona times. Here in Holland, things definitely move slowly into the better direction. I'm very happy with that, and I hope it's all the same for you and that things will go better there as well. Today, I got an interesting hand lined up for you. It's a hand I played recently on Party Poker playing PLO 100. I'm playing four-handed here. As you can see, we're sitting at a cutoff, and this hand is pretty interesting, and we're going to learn more about how to respond versus a flop check raise. And we're going to use poker juice today to analyze if we made the right decision or not. That being said, let's jump right into this hand. I'm open raising here in the cutoff with ace jack jack 9, pretty standard. The big blind decides to make a 3-bet. We make the call in position, also pretty standard, and we go to a flop of 4, 3 deuce 2-tone. Now the SPR here is slightly over what we generally are used to when it comes to 3-bet pots, when it's 100 big blinds. So here the SPR is slightly higher, so around 5 or so is what we are looking at here. When we think about this board texture and the ranges in play, remember our last video, always the starting point of a situation. The big blind's range is not heavily connected to this board. You will have a lot of overpairs and high rundowns, aces that he's going to 3-bet with, so those don't connect too greatly to this board. That being said, he will have some flush draws as well. He will have some aces with like a 5. So he will also have some straights there. But overall, his range is not too connected here. He doesn't have a lot of 2 pairs, sets, straights, those kind of hands. He's being out of position, so he's going to do a lot of checking given the range interaction there. Now, my opponent does make the check. Then it comes to us, like how does our range interact? Our hand obviously is pretty nice here, but like if we think about our range, like our range doesn't connect too strongly to the flop in general. We open raise from the cutoff, so we will have a lot of mid-high rundowns. We will have some mid and high pairs, but a deuce 3-4 board is not heavily connected to the hands that we are open raising with in general. That being said, we still are doing some stabbing here, but we will check back more often here than that we do decide to bet here, given our range also doesn't connect too strongly to the board. However, our hand is strong enough, in my opinion, to go for a bet here. I decided to use a 1/3 sizing here. I think we can go slightly bigger because we are a little bit deeper. The idea of betting here is that we are using, by betting small or by betting somewhat medium sizing, that we go for a polarized strategy. In other words, we're betting a lot of our strong made hands, strong draws, and also add in some of our best bluffs that can often go bet over multiple streets. By using a smaller sizing, or at least we want to use a sizing that allows us to go bet over 3 streets, we put our opponent in a tough situation because he's out of position. And if he's going to be out of position for multiple streets, that's obviously a disadvantage for him. So remember, if you do want to bet, then in general, at higher SPRs, or like this is not even that high of an SPR, but you want to use a sizing that allows you to bet over multiple streets by using a polarized strategy and put your opponent in a tough spot there. Okay, we decide to bet and my opponent goes for a check raise to full pot. Now, after he check raises full pot, I mean, he's not going to fold anymore if we shove. We somewhat know that, like otherwise he would probably use a different sizing. In game, I didn't feel too happy and I was somewhat unsure whether calling or jamming would be better. In the end, I did decide to get the money in. My opponent did make the call, of course. The money goes in. We run good in the first one, rivering a flush. And in the second one, we also make a flush, shipping the pot twice. Or shipping the pot and not splitting it. My opponent shows up with aces 6-4, having an overpair of aces, with a top pair blocker and a gutter to the nut straight. Okay, that being said, could we have played this spot better? Is stacking off on the flop the best move? Should we have done something differently? That is what we are going to find out right now here. And I'm gonna use Poker Juice for that. We are looking into the same spot there and we're gonna learn like what is the best line of action there. So let's open up PokerJuice here. I simulated the hand here. It's exactly the same with stack sizes and positions. We have ace, jack, jack, 9. We open raise. The big blind 3-bets us. I gave him a 6% 3-betting range, which is somewhat standard versus a cutoff. We make the call. Flop is the same. He checks. We bet small. My opponent check raises, and the action is now to us. The question is, what is best? Getting the money in, calling, maybe even folding. Like, what should we do here? Okay, so to analyze this, the first thing we want to do is we want to give our opponent a check raising range and learn how much equity our hand has versus his range. So what I did is what you can do in PokerJuice, you can use the syntax bar here below, and you can give him a flop range that he would use to check raise with. So I did that. I gave him any straight for simplicity. I gave him 2 pairs with additional equity, 2 pairs or better. So 2 pairs are set with additional equity in the form of a flush draw, a nut open-ender, or a gutter. I gave him the nut flush draw with like a pair blocker to the board. So with a deuce, a 3. I gave him the nut flush draw with aces or ace, king, king. And I also gave him aces with a pair blocker to the board in addition to a nut gut shot, which was the actual range of hand he used to check raise with. So aces with like a deuce, a 3, or a 4 in combination with a 6. So we can see if we gave him this range, if we give him this range that he check raises with, we can see that our actual hand has 38% equity versus all these hands that he will check raise with. Now the question is this enough to stack off? And in PokerJuice, there's an easy feature here on top which says stack off equity. And if we would stack off at this specific situation, we would need 40.87% of equity to stack off now. We just saw against this range of hands, we only have 38. So that is not a great scenario, of course, holding not enough equity to stack off. Let's see what would happen if we would stack off here. We're going to use the shove model here. We're going to give our opponent all these hands that he will stack off with. You can see it here. Stacking off here all these hands for 100%. He's not going to fold anymore. And we can see that against those hands we have 39% equity. Here it's 38. I did run this a couple of times and it's switching between 38 and 39. Like apparently these numbers aren't always exactly the same, but you get the idea. We don't have the required equity, and if we would stack off, we're actually going to lose minus $4.66. In other words, we're losing a little bit over 4.5 big blinds in this exact hand if we would get the money in. So the question is there a better option here? Now to understand that, first we can see here that if we would, against the pot size check raise, we need 33.33% equity to continue here. Now we know that we have 38% equity here. These are the odds that we're getting to continue or to call, and we have 38%. So we do have enough equity basically to continue against the check raise here. We do get the pot odds basically. Now to learn more about whether calling would be better than folding here, we can use the equity graph, which is a tool PokerJuice requires here. And I'm going to bring it in here. Make it a little bit smaller so we can see the hand also. And what this equity graph allows us to do is we can see how much equity we actually need or how much equity we actually have on each of the turn cards. Because we can also know, because then we can learn basically whether we can make a better decision on the turn. So stack off equity on next reach, which is another feature in PokerJuice here, which says if we would call and we would go to a turn, we now need on the turn at least 22.62% instead of the 48 we need now. So if we would decide to call on the next street, we have 22.6% equity at least that we need to continue to stack off on the turn if our opponent would get the money in there. Now the equity graph allows us to see whether or not we have that required 22.6% equity on the turn. By giving our opponent this range and by pressing the play button in the equity graph, we will now see an overview of how much equity we have on all of these different turn cards. So we can see here that the diamonds obviously are great for us. We know that we get the nut flush there and the equity is close to 100%. We can also see that on the jacks here, we get 45% equity. And on all the board pairing cards here, the equity ranges from like 29 to 24%. So on all these cards that are possibly being dealt on the turn, we would have more equity than the 22.6%. However, on all the other cards, you can see them here, the equity that we will have on those cards is actually not going to be higher than this number here. You can see that the range of equity goes from 22% to like 20 to 18 up until 17. So all these cards aren't actually too great for us. So what we can learn from this is that if we would make a call here, we can stack off profitably on these cards, and we can actually fold on the other cards that are possibly being dealt here. So by calling, we will stack off on 20 out of 45 turns, and we will fold on 25 until 25 of the 45 turns. So we can stack off on 44% of the cards and fold on 55% of the cards. And by doing this, we will actually do a better job than only shoving the money in right away on the flop. Okay, that is a pretty important and cool takeaway, at least that I would have, that I think here. Sometimes it seems that it's much better to just go for the call instead of right away for the shove on the flop. Sometimes it feels shoving is the easier play, but it's not necessarily a better play. We now learned that shoving is minus EV, but if we would decide to call, there are certain cards that we can stack off and there are certain cards that we can go for a fold. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this one. It was it was a big pot, and it was a hand that definitely gave me some insights into how to continuously play this in the future. Next week, I'm going to publish another episode as well, which is going to cover a similar topic on a different spot, but we're going to look actually into an almost 700 big blind pot. Make sure to check it out. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you will be notified when my next episode is also online. If you have any questions about this, then make sure to use the comment section below or contact me on Instagram or on my Twitch channel when I'm going live there with some PLO cash games. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this one and take care. Have a great day. Good luck at the tables, and I will see you next time in another episode here.